Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It'll be tight play, it'll be tight hockey.
Canada versus the U.S. on the ice. The epic hockey showdown amid high political tensions.
It's more important to respect someone's sovereignty and someone's borders than it is to respect someone's song.
Plus, add them to the list. Police say a truck has hit not one, but two BC overpasses. And
thought like maybe half a dozen or so would show up.
Party in Nanaimo? A BC man named Todd invites Americans fed up with tariff threats and 51st state rhetoric to the harbor city.
In an hour, we had like maybe 100 people that were like, I'll do this. I'm in California. I will come up for this.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The puck dropped not too long ago for one of Canada's and hockey's most intense rivalries. Canada and the U.S. meeting again to battle it out in the final of the Four Nations face-off. Our Janella Hamilton is live at a sports bar in downtown Vancouver. Janella, it's very loud. What's the mood?
Yes, it is very loud. A lot of excitement. Of course, Canada scored not too long ago, so that brought it up to a 1-0. And just seconds ago, the U.S.A. has also scored. So we are at an even 1-1 so far. So the tensions are high. A lot of people, lots of cheering. Of course, there's a lot of electric energy here at Red Car Sports Bar. There are tons of people who are decked out all in their hockey jerseys, their red Maple Leafs. Overall, a lot of Canadian pride. Of course, Canada versus the United States. The best players from both countries facing off for the first time in more than a decade. This championship is happening at an international level. Of course, the last time they faced off was in the Olympics in 2010. So a lot of people here spending the time with family and friends.
It's great to meet other people with the same love of sport and community, and to just really reinforce what we love about this country.
I mean, most Canadians started playing hockey when they were 4. So it's something you grow up with, your team that your father watched. It's, it's part of Canada. It's part of our identity, I would say.
Janella, we can't escape the politics surrounding this game. What do people there say about that?
Yeah, actually, it's been quite a divided answer when asking fans about what do they think of everything that's going on in the world today. And we'll take a look at what they have to say as to why it's so important to have support behind Team Canada tonight.
This is as much about supporting Canada as it is supporting Team Canada. I kind of feel that it's never been more important than right now to kind of get behind our country, and I'm happy that we get to beat the Americans and not Sweden or Finland, so it's going to be good.
It's pretty cool. I mean, we've been deprived from this for a while now, so getting to see it again is sort of bringing up those old memories, so it's cool.
Live from downtown Vancouver. To other news now, concern is growing over how the province's overhaul of its safer drug supply program will work. People who rely on prescription opioids will now need to take them in front of a pharmacist. As Jessica Chung explains, some pharmacists and users say they've been left in the dark.
Opioids like these hydromorphone tablets used to be taken home around a dozen at a time by those with prescriptions under the Safer Supply program. Now, the province has scrapped the take-home model and says those who rely on prescription opioids will need to take them under the supervision of a pharmacist.
They give me 14 a day. No, how much? I can't take 14. Take 14 and then what? Or take 2, then run back in an hour?
Those like Lorna Bird say the change is completely unrealistic. She says with this new policy change, she would have to go into a pharmacy to ingest her prescribed opioids 6 to 7 times a day.
I may as well go get a place right in the pharmacy and live there. Because what else are you going to do? Because, I mean, by the time you leave and get home, you'll be sore again. That's what's going to happen at night. You know, the pharmacy's closed. And then what happens? I don't understand.
The province announced the change on Wednesday, effective immediately. It's aimed at preventing the diversion of prescription opioids into the illicit market. This comes 2 weeks after the BC Conservatives released leaked Ministry of Health slides, which showed government and law enforcement officials knew that prescription opioids were being trafficked nationally and internationally. But some pharmacists say they had no heads up about the change, and they've been given no direction on how to implement it.
Safe supplies is for controlling cravings. If they come to pharmacy and take 2 or 3 tablets, it shouldn't be enough at all for the whole day.
It's going to make it so people can't really have jobs anymore. You know, like a lot of people, they come here at like 7 right on the dot because they need to go to work at 7:30. And if they have to come in multiple times a day, what is that going to mean for them?
They're concerned that this will kill more people and worsen the already critical crisis, and longtime advocates feel the same.
When you have something that's actually working for somebody, you wouldn't, on any other health condition, actually come in and say, hey, we're going to change that to make it more complicated for you. That would actually push somebody, over the edge.
Health Minister Josie Osborne says there are currently around 3,500 people in the Safer Supply program. She says this transition is going to be a process.
This is where the work with community service providers, with the pharmacy community, with prescribers and clinicians is really, really important, so that we can make this as easy as possible for people to do that.
She says the transition to this new model will take weeks to months. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
Concerns are growing over potential new U.S. tariffs aimed at Canadian lumber after more comments by Donald Trump. BC's forest minister says the levies, including anti-dumping fees, could rise more than 50%. More now from Mira Baines.
BC's lumber industry is bracing for higher tariffs as U.S. President Donald Trump renews his call for an additional 25% to duties already imposed.
It is very frustrating for people in the industry. They don't know whether to sell their wood today or hang on to their wood or manufacture more or hire more people or lay people off. It is up and down every day.
Independent Wood Processors Association represents small to medium-sized wood manufacturers across BC. Menzies says many are family-owned companies now left in limbo. U.S. President Donald Trump explored the idea of tariffs on Air Force One last night.
Thinking about maybe 25%.
BC Minister of Forests Ravi Parmar says in addition to the tariffs, there will be an announcement soon on anti-dumping duty rates.
We should take him for his word. We already know that we'll be getting probably today or the latest tomorrow the anti-dumping duty rates.
The existing duties on softwood lumber leaving BC are about 14.4% and could double by the end of the year. If Trump's proposed 25% tariffs go through, the combined tariffs on softwood lumber exported to the U.S. could go up to 50 to 55%. Parmar visited with California builders recently to foster relationships as they try to start the process of reconstruction after devastating fires.
They're going to be paying more, in the case of 20 to 40% more, just to be able to rebuild their homes.
The tariffs could be imposed in early April. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, the candidates for Vancouver's April 5th by-elections are now set. As Chad Pawson explains, rivals of the majority ABC party are pouncing on internal tension, and Mayor Ken Sims promises.
In Vancouver's Olympic Village, Mayor Ken Sim with his 2 new potential councillors, Vancouver Police Union boss Ralph Kaisers and former BC United provincial candidate Jamie Stein.
We believe these 2 candidates are head and shoulders above the other candidates, in our humble opinion, and we want to get them elected.
Both candidates want to make a difference for the city under the ABC banner. The VPD union endorsed Sim for the 2022 election. Stein says he has unfinished business after campaigning in Vancouver Langara for BC United.
I heard a lot of pain from the people on those doorsteps when I was knocking on those doors, and there are issues that I heard that I think that we can help solve here. Issues of affordability, issues of making neighborhoods safer, issues of supporting small businesses.
The race in Vancouver is to replace the Greens' Adrian Carr, who resigned in January, and One City's Christine Boyle, elected to the legislature in October. Since 2022, Sim and his ABC party have dominated council with an agenda centered on public safety and fiscal responsibility. But that's been upended lately, with one caucus member kicked out. She joins 4 other former ABCers now sitting as independents, either at park board or school board. The other 3 parties hope to exploit this. They're voicing criticism of ABC for its $5 million police task force barrage for the downtown east side, and an idea to pause net new supportive housing in that neighborhood to prioritize revitalization. With his performative promises to barrage poor neighborhoods and cancel important services for marginalized people, says One City candidate Lucy Maloney, Ken Sim has eroded trust and won't make Vancouverites safer. He's not working for you. This by-election is seen as a de facto referendum on council. It still has around 2 years left in its mandate. Now, regardless of the outcome of the by-election, ABC will continue to have a majority on council, but by adding 2 new members to his team, Ken Sim's mandate could be supercharged. Opposition parties are hoping to slow ABC down and want a strong voter turnout for April 5th. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, it has happened again. Police say a truck has hit not 1, but 2 overpasses in BC. BC Highway Patrol says it happened just after 9 a.m. on Highway 1 near Glover Road in Langley. Police say the initial investigation shows a westbound tractor-trailer towing a large load of preformed concrete, you can see there, struck the 264th and CP rail overpasses, forcing the far right lane to be shut down. Damage appears to be minimal, but Mounties say the piece of concrete is linked to a company they say is known to them. The Commercial Vehicle and Safety and Enforcement team has been called in to check on any load, height, and permitting issues. These would be the 4th and 5th overpass strikes this year alone, based on a Transportation Ministry tally. All right, listen up, everyone. Party at Todd's Place, and darn near everyone is invited. Let me explain. A call for Americans fed up with tariff threats and 51st state rhetoric to visit Nanaimo is gaining traction online. As Liam Britton explains, the city and the man behind the call are hoping for a big turnout.
Hey, Americans who support Canadians, I have an idea.
Todd Maffin's idea was not a big one, but it's getting big interest.
What if we picked a day in like a month and a half or so where all of you come up here to Vancouver Island? I'm not kidding.
Maffin really likes his hometown of Nanaimo and wants to share it with American visitors seeking an escape from their country.
We have incredible outdoor activities here. We have hiking. We have some of the best brew pubs in the world.
And since he posted that video last week,
2,000 of them said that they would come. My personal goal is 10% of that. If 200 people come on a single weekend, that will have a noticeable effect on our city's economy.
Maffin is in digital marketing and a business journalist. And he's a former radio host and producer, including with CBC.
Hi, Future Todd here.
He makes lots of TikTok videos, like how to avoid U.S. products as cross-border relations worsen.
My comment section was filled more with Americans than Canadians, which I wasn't expecting, and almost all of them were saying, yes, boycott our products. We don't like this either.
That's part of what led to his invitation idea.
I thought like maybe half a dozen or so would show up, and my wife and I would take them out for dinner or lunch or whatever. In an hour, we had like maybe 100 people that were like, I'll do this. I'm in California. I will come out for this.
Nanaimo's mayor is applauding the effort.
Canada's a welcoming country. Canadians are good people. They don't deserve the treatment from the White House, and I think many Americans very much disagree with their president, so this is an opportunity to build a stronger relationship between our peoples and ignore the political leadership or lack of it in Washington.
Maffin's not sure what turnout will materialize, but hopes people can enjoy everything Nanaimo has to offer.
Some people are coming just for the walking tour of Nanaimo bars.
And from April 25th to 27th, no one is barred from Nanaimo. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Who doesn't love a good Nanaimo pun? Russ LeCate joins us with a first look at the weather. What do we get, Russ?
Well, Dan, I haven't looked out the window in a long time since the hockey game started, but it is, I understand it's raining out there a little bit, yeah. And I did check back on yesterday's numbers because it was kind of hit and miss with the rain. Areas over the far south and areas closer to the water, less than 10 millimeters of rain, but we were upwards of 25 closer to the North Shore Mountains. Gives you an idea. These systems, they're not stormy, but they have the potential to add a bit more rain each time. We are still 58% below normal for our February rainfall totals. That's all about to change because we have a series of storms bearing down on the coast now, and I suspect we're going to have intermittent rain for the better part of the next 5 days or so, and in fact, that starts for tomorrow.
Okay.
Dan, there it is behind me, 9 degrees in the rain.
Right there. Thanks, Russ. Still ahead, border data shows fewer Canadians are driving south. More on why after the break. Data from BC and Washington state shows fewer people are crossing the border. As the CBC's John Hernandez reports, leaders of nearby communities blame the weak Canadian dollar and mounting political tensions.
Thousands of cars cross the Peace Arch border into Whatcom County just about every day, but lately there isn't as much traffic, and it's already ringing some alarm bells.
This is becoming like what we experienced during COVID.
Data from BC and Washington State show there's been a lot fewer cars traveling south compared to the same time in 2024. Traffic was already down for the first few weeks of the year. Then, the day after Donald Trump's inauguration, a 29% drop. The traffic volume steadily declined right up until the Family Day weekend, which averaged 40% fewer drivers daily. There were also decreases at the Pacific Highway and Sumas border crossings. Local leaders have some ideas on what's behind the numbers.
The Canadian dollar has gone very low, which is unfortunate. At the same time, what is happening with the federal government, the talk of tariffs.
Residents in these U.S. border towns are aware Canadians might be choosing to avoid spending their dollars in the U.S. amid the mounting political turmoil and threats of annexation.
All the cities do report a slight decrease in sales revenue or maybe even a flattening. We don't know whether that's because Canadians aren't shopping or Americans aren't shopping, but we are concerned about it.
Blaine Mayor Mary Lou Stewart says tourism dollars are critical to her border town's economy.
And I have lots of family and friends in Canada, and they are saying, we're not going to forget this, and I can understand that.
So these neighbors to the south want to send Canadians a message.
We want them to understand that whatever sentiment is coming out of Washington, D.C. does not represent the feelings of the city of Blaine.
You are always welcome.
A peaceful gesture as these border towns hold out hope this recent visitor decline doesn't become a long-term trend. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Some BC LifeLabs locations have been temporarily closed as unionized workers begin job action. As Pinky Wong reports, the union says workers want better wages and working conditions.
Fair deal! A dozen workers were rallying at the picket line at the West 7th Avenue LifeLabs in Vancouver. It is one of 18 locations that are closed in BC today due to the job action. Mandy DeVille has been working for LifeLabs as a medical lab technologist for more than 30 years. She says the company is understaffed.
See, it's our symbol of how our workers feel that they are worked to the bone, that they have nothing left to give.
We want it now! The field is also the bargaining committee chairperson with the BC General Employees Union. The union represents about 1,200 workers at LifeLabs. It says they're demanding for fair wages along with better scheduling.
The lab assistants, the ones that are in the PSCs, the starting wage at LifeLabs is $25.27. In the hospital environment, the starting wage is $29.27. That's a huge gap.
She says the wage disparity ranges anywhere from 4 to 16% across the company. LifeLabs perform lab tests to diagnose, treat, monitor, and prevent diseases. The company says it serves more than 7.1 million patients in BC at 129 collection centers. In a statement, LifeLabs acknowledged the labor dispute and said it is taking steps to minimize disruptions as some patient service centers will be closed on a rotating basis. Some medical practitioners and patients were recognizing the efforts of LifeLab workers.
I send a lot of tests to them, but 60–70%.
I think they should get equal pay to the hospital.
I'll wait till they dispute it. I like to support, the people that want to try to make a better living in BC.
The BCGEU says negotiation with U.S.-based Quest Diagnostic broke in December 2024.
We don't want to see patient care or the needs of the workers that provide that care eroded for a slightly higher profit margin, right? That's just unacceptable. I think it's unacceptable to Canadians, to British Columbians.
The union president says the job action will continue until they reach a fair deal. LifeLabs advised patients to check their website for updates on closures and available services. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
A look at the day that was in Port Alberni. Blustery and some sun peeking through the clouds over Harbour Quay. Russ Lacade will have your BC-wide forecast coming up. 15 years ago, the world's media was on our doorstep. The 2010 Winter Olympics brought reporters and camera crews to Metro Vancouver and Whistler in droves. And stories about our region and city and people were being seen around the globe. Let's take a look at the stories coming out of this city way back then.
It's their second day in Vancouver, and the crew from Japan's Fuji TV is searching for a story. They need an angle, something that will grab viewers back home. Atsunobu Miura's first assignment: what kind of security does nearly $1 billion buy? What kind of terrorist threat is there, he says, and how will security handle it?
Thanks.
Then, like any desperate reporter would, they hit us up for story ideas.
The International Broadcast Center is starting to buzz as over 10,000 media types hit the city hunting for stories, some not so complimentary. England's newspaper The Guardian recently dubbed these the gloomy games, claiming Vancouver's Olympics are headed for financial disaster. Sports Illustrated told a similar tale that folks here are dreading the games. But those are just a few of many storylines about Canada now beaming around the world.
I'm the one, for example, who's been charged with doing the story of why do Canadians love hockey so much.
Kevin Tibbles works for NBC in Chicago, but he's blessed with insider knowledge. He originally hails from Scarborough, Ontario.
One thing that interests me is it's so un-Canadian for Canadians to say things like, we want to win more gold medals than everyone else. And I think a lot of the American folks that I'm with are kind of scratching their heads saying, did they just say that?
This crew from Korea is filming the arrival of the Korean team. They're following their own athletes, but also plan to file video postcards from BC.
밴쿠버는 휘슬러 스키장이 워낙 유명하니까.
We want to showcase Whistler Ski Resort, he says, and show Koreans how Vancouverites live, what they do for fun, what they eat. But images of BC won't all look like a tourist brochure. Kevin Johnson of USA Today made a beeline for the downtown east side.
I think it's a different story about how another city is dealing with its drug problem.
He and his photographer are touring the safe injection site. Staff here have been flooded with media requests, reporters curious about a government-sanctioned site for heroin addicts. Likewise, German reporter Thomas Roth isn't here just to show BC's premier enjoying fun and games. He's already filed a report on the struggles facing the Mount Currie Indian Reserve near Whistler. And he's reporting on the drug issues facing Vancouver's east side.
I personally find it's a very sad story, and I realize, not being the first time in Vancouver, that the city is really struggling to solve these problems. But everybody who thinks there's a quick fix for these problems is wrong.
This is a Today Show.
Yeah. Back to Kevin Tibbles, NBC's Canadian expert, who's chasing more than a sports story.
A lot of Americans probably don't even know that Canadians are fighting and in many ways dying in disproportionate numbers in Afghanistan. The show that I work for actually wants to make that point that, you know, we have this ally up there and perhaps we shouldn't ignore them as much as we often do.
Canada the good, Canada the ugly. Expect reporters from around the world to leave no stone unturned during the Olympics. Duncan McHugh, CBC News, Vancouver.
Fast forward to today, and parts of the world may see Canada in a much different light. Joining us now is one of the journalists we just saw in that story, Kevin Tibbles, former NBC News correspondent out of Chicago, Canadian born and bred, and former CBC reporter. Kevin, thanks for joining us. You raised an interesting point in that story around Americans possibly ignoring us. Are they aware of what's going on right now between Canada and the U.S., do you think?
No, I would say for the most part, they probably aren't. I think that should, by the way, I certainly have aged quite a bit, haven't I?
Your words, not mine. We all have.
I think perhaps should President Trump, at the end of his 30-day deadline, although he has already struck out at steel and aluminum. Should the tariffs come on, and should the Americans start feeling some sort of an economic effect as a result of those tariffs, that may be when they start to pay attention, or at least realize that when they're watching their 6 o'clock news and the weather map comes on, there actually is a country up there north of North Dakota, and it just happens to be named Canada. But up until then, I just think that there are just so many other things and so many other moving parts going on in their little world with their little belly button that they probably will not be paying attention to the fact that we are saying we're going to have counter tariffs, or we're going to have an election, or we're going to have a leadership convention, or any of the aforementioned things.
Looking back at that time 15 years ago, Vancouver was a very different place, as was Canada, as was the U.S. Is there a story, and you were talking about what you were looking for, was there a story that stood out to you from 2010 that stays with you?
Well, first of all, I was looking for pins. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
I did the same thing in 2010.
But I mean, the one story I did, I did it. I used to work for Tom Brokaw, and I've got a lot of respect for Tom Brokaw. And during the Vancouver Olympics, Tom did a whole story on the whole Gander situation during 9/11, when the planes came in, and that went on to become Come From Away, the great play. And Tom did that story about how Americans really look up to Canadians, and how we're there when they need us, and those sorts of things. The story I did was sort of the polar opposite of that, speaking to people about how Canadians, are often sort of taken aback by the fact that Americans, don't know diddly about what goes on in Canada, and the fact that, oftentimes when I was working, and I did it for a long time, you go into a city like Detroit, for example, which is right across the border from Windsor, you couldn't get any Canadian television. Whereas I could go to Whitehorse, Yukon, and turn on the television, I would get Detroit news with, fires and police cars. And I found that, Canadians, this is a turning point for Canadians, and I'm certainly not running for any office or anything, but it's a turning point because I think it's time for Canadians to realize that they are Canadian, that there is a Canada, and that they do represent certain things that are different from other parts of the world. And other parts of the world include what's going on south of the border. And it's time to stop apologizing for the fact that you happen to be Canadian. And it's also time to stop sort of trying to suck up to Big Brother or what have you. Just, be who you are. Listen to the Tragically Hip, for crying out loud.
Kevin Tibbles, former NBC correspondent, former CBC reporter, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Federal Heritage Minister Pascale Saint-Onge has proposed a new funding mechanism for the CBC, one set in law independent of federal budgets. She says the public broadcaster needs stable, predictable, and better funding.
We know that our means of communications are controlled, in most parts, by tech billionaire oligarchs in the United States. More than ever, it's important for Canadians to be able to rely on their own sources of information made by and for Canadians. Radio-Canada CBC has been there for the past 100 years, through conservative and liberal governments. It is more relevant than ever.
Presenting her blueprint for reforming CBC's mandate, Saint-Onge also suggests keeping news programs ad-free and removing fees for services like streaming. Saint-Onge says the public broadcaster is a pillar of Canada's cultural identity and sovereignty. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he wants to cut what he calls wasteful spending on CBC. The wreckage of the plane that crashed at Toronto's Pearson Airport on Monday has now been cleared from the runway. But on the tarmac, work remains. And as Nicole Williams explains, that means some flights are being canceled and travel plans disrupted.
I have an announcement from the airline.
Just 3 hours before boarding, hopeful passengers at Pearson Airport, ready to check in their bags, are given some crushing news.
Due to extenuating circumstances, we are unfortunately canceling all Sunwing outbound flights this afternoon.
13 flights at Pearson alone Wednesday and more on Thursday.
We're just not going to get there. We're not going to get a room.
This passenger en route from Halifax to the Dominican Republic for his sister's wedding. He says Sunwing not only canceled his flight, but his hotel stay too.
It's my sister. If I could go there and sleep in the pool, I would. I can't even make it.
Sunwing announcing it needed to prioritize getting stranded passengers abroad home. Air Canada and WestJet also playing catch up.
My husband and I were set to leave from our holiday in Cancun on Monday night. It was very confusing. It was a lot because I know that so many people were probably displaced and stranded.
There is mounting frustration in the wake of the crash of Delta Flight 4819, which shut down 2 of Pearson's busiest runways in the process.
It highlights just how dependent aviation in Canada is on Pearson Airport.
Airlines already playing catch-up to a ballooning backlog because of severe snowstorms in eastern Canada.
I just wanted to cry, and we were just like everybody looking at each other. What are we going to do? 45 people here. What are we doing with the babies and everything?
The wreckage of the Delta flight was cleared away Wednesday night, taken to a hangar for further investigation.
Delta says all 21 people injured in the crash have since been released from hospital. As a gesture of goodwill, it's also offering everyone that was on board $30,000 US, no strings attached. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
If you missed your Okanagan peaches last summer, bad news. We may be in for a repeat this year. Why climate change is upping fruit prices after the break. The recent blast of snow across much of this country has turned the sidewalks in the largest city in our country into obstacle courses. And as Nama Weingarten reports, for some people, the snow has made getting around Toronto not just difficult, but nearly impossible.
So right now I am stuck. There's a pile of snow right here that I can't clear.
For Emily Chan, getting around the city since last week's snowfall has been a challenge.
And it's incredibly frustrating because I now have to limit where I can go, who I can go see, and I've had to stay home a lot more.
Oh my God. And she's not alone.
Actually, just yesterday, I got stuck right there at the curb cut and had to have a series of really friendly strangers help me basically dig my wheelchair out of the snow. When there are sidewalks that are plowed, great. Some of them are not even wide enough actually for my wheelchair to fit through. So imagine those little narrow alleys that people are trying to step one foot in front of the other. That's a no-go for my wheelchair.
Our cane is like an extension of our fingertip. We're using the cane to track the ground for landmarks. But when the ground is covered with 2 feet of snow, the paths that we are trained to use suddenly become potentially impossible to travel.
Removing the 53 centimeters of snow will take time, 3 weeks, according to the city.
I want to see a commitment from the City of Toronto to have an accessible snow removal plan in place. I don't want it to take 3 weeks. I don't want it to take a long time for me to be able to go outside and enjoy the things that I want to do. I don't want to feel left behind.
When asked about the lack of accessibility, the manager of transportation service said all sidewalks have been cleared at some point.
The snow gets moved around. People move the snow around when they are crossing the street. They move it when they're trying to dig out their residences or their businesses. If it's plowed on the sidewalk and the plow comes by, it's going to knock the snow back out onto the sidewalk. So it's a bit of a continual process that has to happen.
In a statement, the city said they expect to visit sidewalks that need snow removal within the next week, adding that they consulted with people with accessibility needs last year and got new sidewalk plowing equipment to be faster and more effective. Nama Weingarten, CBC News, Toronto.
As a potential trade war looms, buying local produce is becoming more important for many British Columbians. But even that is a challenge. Experts say climate change is upending harvests and driving up production costs. Radio-Canada's Camille Vernet visited the Okanagan, where fruit growers are the first to pay the price.
Iconic farmlands, the fruits of the Okanagan, are renowned across the country. But these peach and cherry orchards have seen better days. Climate change has hit them hard and could also hit your wallet.
Dead limb from the freeze. Some new growth down there, but fortunately, half this tree looks dead.
The results of last year's cold snap, which broke minimum temperature records across British Columbia.
From +6 to -28 over 30, 40 hours. So a huge swing.
Debrar was raised on this fruit farm, taking over from his father, who harvested this land for 40 years. But the last 4 years have been unusually challenging.
Yeah, financial losses were huge. We've had heat domes in 21, we've had freezes in multiple years. It's been devastating. The crops have never been the same. Last year was the first time my dad said himself that he hasn't had a single peach on a tree. So we had 0 peaches, not even one for our family to eat, and that was the whole Okanagan. There was just nothing left.
Last year, if you bought a peach, that peach did not come from the Okanagan. It came from somewhere else, and that can have an influence on its price. Climate change can affect the quality and the quantity of fruit and vegetable produced worldwide, and for some, it can actually drive up the cost. For others, the impact is different.
We found prices increase, decrease, or sometimes remain the same. It really depends on the produce and the type of weather extreme.
Kushenk Bajaj looked at the wholesale data for 18 fruit and 16 vegetables from 2010 to 2022 in Canada. The results, which are currently under peer review, are surprising. On average, extreme heat increased lettuce price by 36% and cauliflower by almost 30%. Avocados increased by almost 40% due to cold weather. Grapes price rose by nearly 20% when faced with droughts. However, the price of apples and potatoes declined by 8% with heat stress.
Apples, like humans, also get sunburnt, which causes their quality to decline, resulting in prices declining as well.
Increases in price have gone up a lot higher than they have gone down.
Small order. Okay.
This retailer says climate change has a big impact on his business.
Prices have definitely skyrocketed. We are seeing shortages of daily staple vegetables and fruits everywhere, so that is reflective in the supply chain, and we see it at the retailers.
He says he has to find supply outside of his traditional supply chain, and other retailers have to do the same too.
Because of the lack of crops in the local areas, in like Summerland and Kelowna, they were bringing peaches in from places like Georgia, North Carolina. When we don't have it in our local environment, in our local growing areas, we have to rely on international partners, which means we have to have the added costs of currency exchange and transportation costs.
Experts warn that if greenhouse gas emissions are not reduced, climate change will be increasingly costly for consumers and farmers.
We'll need more finances and policies to help farmers adapt to these weather extremes. At the same time, Canada also needs to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions.
And according to Debrar, we are already losing farmers because of those changes.
I'm seeing farmers leaving the business. It's just impacted everyone, not just financially, it's mentally, it's physically. It's a grueling job that we love to do, but if there's no return in the end, after 4 years, it can become very taxing on you.
In spite of the changing climate, he wants to keep going as long as he can.
These will be the peaches for next year right here. We want to be able to produce food for everyone to eat. That's the ultimate goal in the end. We have a passion for this. We believe in ourselves. And I know the public believes in us. Cherries look much better. We'll have something, I hope. This is good.
Camille Vernet, CBC News, Summerland.
Meteorologist Russ LeCay joins us with the BC-wide weather forecast. Unlike places in the Okanagan, there's some interesting news about the interior.
It's really warming up in the interior. And of course, the cold snap broke here, Dan, I'm thinking it was about a week ago, give or take, when the final bit of the snow melted away. Just have a look at the jet stream here. The picture really tells you exactly what's going on. It's a double-barrel jet stream, but the flow coming off the Pacific, and it's from the southwest, pushing right across the Coast Range Mountains, all across the interior, just a continuous flow of this milder and milder air. And we're really starting to see that now in a number of our observations around the province. This was today's high. Of course, it's been around 9 degrees, give or take, in the south coast and Vancouver Island for a number of days already. It's warmed up to 8 degrees in Prince Rupert. Have a look across the interior. This is really strange for what is still the middle of winter, essentially. 5 above in Osoyoos, 6 in Kamloops, where that one stands out. Fort St. John, which was minus 20s, minus 30s for a high for several consecutive weeks, now up to +2. I'm predicting that forecast high goes to 10 degrees this weekend. 10 degrees in Fort St. John, so some big changes. A model forecast, this is the here and now. I want to roll it ahead to the first half of the day on Friday. So it's light rain on the coast tomorrow, a little light snow in the interior as temperatures drop down to around +1. That's the first half of the day tomorrow. And then throughout the second half of the day, a lot of that snow begins to mix with rain and change over to rain entirely. And it warms up again. So we're talking about a half a dozen degrees in Kamloops, Quesnel, Williams Lake, those areas warming up to 4 or 5 degrees. Prince George, 5 degrees. A little light snow changing to rain in the second half of the day. Fort St. John gets sunny breaks in 6. And on the south coast here, it's not a stormy day. It's really a fair amount of light rain moving into Vancouver Island. It'll be a bit windier over the island than it will be in the lower mainland. For Metro Vancouver here, I'm counting on intermittent light rain tomorrow. Heavier rain, not all day, Saturday or Sunday, but a few pockets of downpours moving through. And that'll likely give us sufficient rainfall to reach our monthly normals before we get to the end of the month. Looks like the pattern starts changing again around the middle of next week, Dan, so a little sun in the longer range forecast.
That sounds pretty good. Thanks, Russ.
You're welcome.
Still ahead, a gym class favorite is going global. And Calgary is hosting some of the best and bravest players from around the world. You'll want to see this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
Check out CBC News BC, your local streaming channel. It's a free ad-supported TV channel that's available 24/7, delivering breaking news, including weather updates, daily headlines, and sharing stories that matter to British Columbians. Stream your favorite CBC programs like The Early Edition, BC Today, and On the Coast. CBC News BC is available on Roku, LG, and Samsung smart devices.
It is a sport many of you may have played in high school or elementary school, whether you wanted to or not. Dodgeball has been a gym class staple for decades. Now it's hitting the international stage. Dave Gilson has more as Calgary plays host to the first ever World Youth Open this week.
The event includes about 200 players 9 to 17 years old from 6 countries. 13-year-old Liam Padley is with the Saskatchewan team.
I think it's really cool, all the environment and stuff, and there's more people to meet and you get to play the game you love. Well, this is a sport that's not well known, so it's really cool that we can take it to the international stage. You have to make sure your arms are warmed up because you need to be throwing, and then you gotta catch and dodge. Make sure that you don't step on any lines or you might be out, and you gotta take care of your body.
Organizers say each game includes 6 players a side, 6 balls in play, and a lot of action, strategy, and skill. 16-year-old Hong Kong player Anthony Holiday says he loves the sport.
I love how it's inclusive and anyone can play. You can play to your strengths. If you're taller, then you have like a higher leverage to be able to throw. If you're shorter, it's easier to dodge. I just love that about the sport, really. Well, I'm hoping to learn how other countries play, not just Hong Kong, develop my understanding of the game, and hopefully make some new friends.
World Dodgeball Federation President Dwayne Wazinski is an event organizer. He hopes the Open will promote the sport and provide kids with opportunities to enjoy themselves, bond with others, and experience playing on an international stage.
So having this event, and especially having it in Canada, is a great way to showcase how the kids enjoy it and how fun it is for them to participate. So trying to get kind of more kids involved, they love it, and every time we do something at the very rec level, we always get really good numbers. So this event is going to help a bit in formalizing it. Some countries have done a really good job of formalizing youth dodgeball. In Canada, the United States, we've kind of struggled with it a bit.
The Open runs until the 22nd. Dave Gilson, CBC News, Calgary.
You get to wear a cool jersey, too. What's not to like? Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. We will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.